Once Trump comes into office and we take a look at the rhetoric on immigration into the United States, I want to pause for a moment and think about how we treat those who come to the United States. One of the things that I think it's cowardly is to call people coming to the US an invasion. I have never heard of an invasion where women and children come to a land and unarmed men come to a land. Most invasions that I've heard of have been armed conflict. People come over with guns to kill, the purpose to kill and take over. So I hope that this video will kind of change the wording that we use. I think it's cowardly to use the word invasion when referring to women, children, and unarmed men coming to the United States. So let's set that aside because the important point that I want to make here is that right now, we are not the ones in need. We have people coming here who are the ones in need. But that may change. That may change. And it wouldn't take a long time for that to change. Let me explain how. If there was a nuclear war, about 100 million people would die within the United States alone, within the first hour. Another 50 million would die um, within 1 to 3 days. So let's think about that, okay? That leaves over 120 million Americans still alive. People that need to eat, drink water, people who need electricity, people who need healthcare, so on and so forth. Now, even in a full-scale nuclear war, I'm sure most experts would agree, most of the destruction would be focused on specific areas of the country, major metropolitan areas, military bases, and other infrastructure, industrial infrastructure. So, for example, many cities like New York, Washington, Los Angeles, um, Miami, places like that would be destroyed in a full-scale nuclear war. Now, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, or near Jacksonville, Florida. An atomic nation in Miami would not necessarily affect me. I wouldn't even know about it until maybe 30 minutes later. Now, there are naval bases in Jacksonville, so I would probably be affected because there would be they would, it's a military base, so they would take that out, right? There's a submarine base close to here. It's about 30 miles away. Um, and even if there was a nuclear detonation at the naval base, which is about 30 miles away, depending on the yield of the atomic bomb, I would probably not feel the effect. I would probably lose electricity, of course. But for the most part, my house would not be destroyed. Again, depending on the yield, right? If it's a Sarbamba type, then yeah, the roof will probably be blown off my house. Um, but overall, depending on where the bomb is, more than likely because of where I live, I would survive. And about 120 million other Americans would survive too. So what would happen is that these 120 million Americans would need healthcare, would need water, clean water, food, right? They would need all these necessities. But the damage to the infrastructure would be so intense that those commodities would not be readily available for a very long time. And within 2 weeks after a nuclear war, when people run out of the food that they have, um, people would begin to starve to death because there's no more food being produced. There's no more food coming in. Um, and now we also have to talk about a nuclear winter, which would affect most of the northern hemisphere. That is the United States, Canada, Europe, Russia, obviously, and maybe China. So most of the fire from with the smoke from the fires would rise up and cover the northern hemisphere. Sometimes some scientists believe that it would cover the southern hemisphere as well, but I don't really believe that. The Earth is a very big place, but we also have to remember that after 9/11, the buildings, which was like five buildings, they burned for like 3 months. Now imagine all of New York, all of New York City, right? Burning. All of the metropolitan area, Queens, Brooklyn, all of that burning. How much is that going to produce? Washington D.C., the suburbs outside of Washington D.C., um, the military bases, all that fire, right? So that would cause a nuclear winter. So what does that mean? That means that even if we could grow crops, we won't be able to because there's no sun, and because the clouds, the smoke is blocking out the sun, so there's no photosynthesis. Nothing would grow. So it would quickly lead to starvation. Now, what would happen then? Right? But that's the question. What would happen then? Me, my family. Um, at best, we have food for about 2 weeks to survive. We would start going out, scrounging, looking for food. And obviously, there'd be 120 million people out there looking for food as well. Obviously, there would be a lot of violence, a lot of looting, and sparing. A lot of people would say, well, the people the police would contain that. No, they won't. Okay, people were fighting over toilet paper. Don't tell me that it's been 2 weeks since you've eaten, you're not going to resort to severe forms of violence. People will resort to severe forms of violence. So, okay, so now you have this whole infrastructure that has fallen apart. You heard me say earlier that the northern hemisphere would be the only one affected, and that's very true. I wanted to talk about this um, after a few months ago when Trump said that Mexico would be destroyed in a nuclear war. I don't know where he got that information from. As far as I know, Mexico is not even in NATO. Mexico, there's no reason why Mexico would be attacked with ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Um, I I don't know why he said that Mexico would be destroyed, because Mexico is not targeted. Maybe if there's a nuclear base, sorry, maybe if there's a military base, a U.S. military base, then that area might be targeted. But overall, Mexico is a big country. It won't be affected like we would. As a matter of fact, they probably won't even lose electricity. They're on a whole different network, right? Um, for their electrical needs. So they wouldn't be affected. Um, in the meantime, us in the United States, we would be affected. We wouldn't have electricity. We wouldn't have clean water. Obviously, no food coming in. Um, and a total collapse of society. So, what will people start doing? Let's think about that. What would you do with your family? Would you stay, or would you try to go to a different place? By the end of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, people will start hearing that Mexico, in Central America, in South America, have not been affected by the nuclear war. So what will happen in people's minds? What would you do? You start migrating to Mexico, right? You start making your way to Mexico to escape the fires, to escape the smoke, to look for food, water, shelter. And then we would be the ones in dire need. Would we want to be considered invaders? Would we want people in Mexico to treat us like criminals? No, we wouldn't want that. We would want help. We would want compassion. But as we move into the Trump administration, how are we going to treat these people? Will we treat them with compassion? Will we say, hey, even though you've come here, we're not readily available to help you, but we're going to do our best to treat you humanely as we repatriate back to your country. I don't see that happening. I see a lot of demonizing of immigrants, people who are coming here just to look for a better life. And if we go down that path, and if we're ever in that dire need, karma will come and bite us in the butt. Those people in Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras will remember what we did, and they will not allow us into their countries. If anything, they will hunt us down and kill us. We would be in dire need because the northern hemisphere would not be habitable. Furthermore, we have to remember that not only, even though these people haven't been affected by blasts and their infrastructure hasn't been destroyed, the world economy would collapse. And the world economy depends heavily on trade and deals with other nations, tourism, things like that. So the world's economy would collapse. So it would be even more difficult for any nation to accept us coming into their country because with the world's economy collapsed, what will become the currency will be food, farmland, and that will last for years, maybe even decades. So as we come to a Trump term, let's think about that. Right now, we're on top, we're the big dog, but that could end in a matter of a few weeks, and we would be moving south to seek a better life for our families. Would we want to then be treated like criminals? We need to think about that. As Americans, we need to think about that because it's not out of the realm of possibilities that that could happen. It really isn't. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. As you go into a Trump term, think about those things.